He thought she was just another easy target, until she revealed who she really was. The courtroom was silent, tense. Officer Daniels sat confidently on the witness stand, his uniform crisp, his expression smug. He had done this before, framing black people, twisting the truth, bending the system to his will. And why wouldn't he? The system had always protected men like him. Today was no different, or so he thought. Across the courtroom, sitting at the defendant's table, was Maya Carter, a black woman, accused of a crime she did not commit. But to Daniels, she was just another case. Just another person who wouldn't stand a chance against his carefully fabricated lies. He had been through this process countless times. A few misleading statements, some exaggerated claims, and the jury would believe him. They always did. But today, something felt different. Something about Maya's presence unsettled him, though he couldn't quite place why. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't nervous. She just sat there watching, waiting. The prosecutor, a young man eager to prove himself, cleared his throat and addressed the court. Officer Daniels, can you describe the events of the night in question? Daniels nodded, leaning forward slightly as if to command the jury's attention. Yes, sir. On the night of the incident, I was patrolling the downtown area when I witnessed the defendant, Maya Carter, acting suspiciously near a jewelry store. I approached her, identified myself, and asked what she was doing. She became aggressive, started resisting, and attempted to flee the scene. I had no choice but to detain her. He paused, glancing at the jury as if to gauge their reaction. Some nodded slightly, others remained expressionless. But Maya? She didn't flinch. The defense attorney, an older black man who had seen too many cases like this, stood up. Officer Daniels, he began, his voice calm but firm. Did you have any prior knowledge of my client before this night? Daniels hesitated for a fraction of a second, then shook his head. No, sir. I had never seen her before. Maya's attorney nodded slowly. And you claim she resisted arrest? Daniels smirked slightly. That's correct. She became violent, kicking and punching. I had to use necessary force to restrain her. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Necessary force. Everyone knew what that meant, but Daniels continued as if nothing was wrong. I later searched her and found a stolen bracelet in her pocket, which was later confirmed to belong to the jewelry store in question. Another murmur, this one louder. The evidence seemed damning. A stolen bracelet, resisting arrest. It was all there, packaged neatly in a way that made it easy for the jury to believe. But still, Maya sat there, her hands folded in her lap, completely unshaken. The defense attorney turned to Maya. Miss Carter, would you like to respond to these claims? Maya stood up slowly, her eyes locking onto Daniels. He felt something shift in the air. Yes, I would. Her voice was steady, controlled. She turned to the jury, then back to Daniels. You say I was resisting arrest? That I became violent. She took a step forward. Tell me, Officer Daniels, have you ever tried to arrest a Navy SEAL? Silence. A sharp, piercing silence that made even the judge lean forward slightly. Daniels blinked, his confident demeanor faltering for the first time. Excuse me. Maya nodded. That's right. I am Lieutenant Maya Carter of the United States Navy. SEAL Team 8. Trained in counterterrorism, combat strategy, and survival tactics. I've spent years in situations far more intense than this courtroom, and let me tell you something. She stepped closer. If I had resisted your arrest, you wouldn't be standing here right now. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, whispers, the shuffling of feet. Daniels looked around, his confidence draining rapidly. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how the script went. Maya continued, her voice unwavering. Let's talk about that stolen bracelet. Funny how I've never been to that jewelry store before. Funny how there are no fingerprints on it. Funny how the security footage from that night was accidentally erased. Yet I have GPS records proving I wasn't even near that area when the so-called crime happened. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have evidence that Officer Daniels not only planted that bracelet on me, but has a history of false arrests targeting black individuals. I have documents, testimonies, and even statements from fellow officers who have seen him tamper with evidence before. This is not just about me. This is about how many people like me have been framed, brutalized, and silenced under the same badge that is supposed to serve and protect. The weight of her words settled over the courtroom. Daniel's face was pale now, his hands gripping the edges of the stand. "She's lying," he blurted out. She's trying to manipulate the court." But the panic in his voice betrayed him. The jury saw it. The judge saw it. The entire courtroom saw it. The defense attorney stepped forward, placing a folder on the judge's bench. "Your Honor, we would like to submit this as evidence. Proof of misconduct, perjury, and racial profiling by Officer Daniels." The judge took the folder, flipping through it. His expression darkened. He looked up at Daniels. "Officer Daniels, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Daniels opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Maya, then at the jury, then at his lawyer. But he knew it was over. The power he had wielded for so long was slipping away, exposed under the weight of the truth. Maya exhaled, steady and sure. "This isn't just about me," she said again, looking around the room. "This is about justice. Real justice. Not the kind twisted by those who abuse their authority. Not the kind that targets people based on the color of their skin, but the kind that actually holds people accountable." The judge nodded slowly, then turned to the bailiff. "Officer Daniels, please stand." Daniels did, his face devoid of its earlier smugness. The judge's voice rang through the courtroom. "You are hereby placed under arrest for perjury, falsifying evidence, and misconduct under oath." Gasps filled the room once more. Daniels stammered, tried to argue, but the bailiff was already stepping forward, handcuffs in hand. Maya watched as Daniels was led away. The weight that had pressed on her chest since this nightmare began was finally lifting. But she knew this was just one battle in a much larger war. The war against a system that had failed so many before her. But today, at least, justice had won. And as she walked out of the courtroom, the eyes of the people in the gallery following her with admiration and awe, she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Maya stepped out of the courtroom, the weight of what had just happened settling into her bones. The sun was high, the air thick with the tension that still lingered from inside. Reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashing, microphones thrust toward her. Ms. Carter, how does it feel to expose Officer Daniels? Did you know from the start that you were being framed? Do you think this case will set a precedent for police accountability?" The questions flew at her like bullets, rapid and relentless. But Maya wasn't ready to answer. Not yet. This wasn't about sound bites. This was about justice, about a truth that had been buried for too long. She pushed past the crowd, her attorney walking beside her, shielding her as best he could. "Let's get you out of here," he murmured, guiding her toward a black SUV parked at the curb. Maya slid into the back seat, exhaling sharply as the door shut behind her. The chaos outside dulled to a distant hum, but inside, the weight of everything pressed against her. Her attorney, Marcus Reynolds, turned in his seat. "You did good in there, Maya. Really good." She scoffed, rubbing her temples. "It shouldn't have taken all that. It shouldn't have taken me being a Navy SEAL to prove my innocence. What if I was just a regular black woman with no military background? What if I didn't have the resources to fight back?" Marcus sighed. "Then you would have been another statistic. Another name lost in a broken system." That truth stung. Maya looked out the window as the car pulled away from the courthouse, her mind racing. She thought back to the night of the arrest. The flashing lights, the cold metal of the handcuffs, the way Daniels had smiled like he had already won. She clenched her fists. He had done this before. He had destroyed lives before. And there were more like him. So many more. The SUV pulled up to a modest brownstone in the heart of the city. Maya stepped out, taking a deep breath. She hadn't been home in days, caught in the whirlwind of legal battles and courtroom drama. As soon as she stepped inside, she collapsed onto the couch, her body aching from exhaustion. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, she grabbed her laptop, opened it, and started typing. She wrote everything. Every detail. Every moment. From the first time Daniels laid eyes on her to the second the handcuffs clicked around his own wrists. She wasn't just going to move on. She was going to make sure the world knew. She posted it online, sharing the security footage she had uncovered, the documents Marcus had gathered, the testimonies of others who had suffered under Daniel's abuse of power. Within hours, the post exploded. #JusticeForMaya started trending. Her inbox flooded with messages, some of support, some of hate. "You're a hero," one read. "You should have just complied," another sneered. But Maya didn't care. She wasn't doing this for praise or approval. She was doing this because too many people had been silenced. As the days passed, the fallout from the case spread. News outlets picked up the story. Activists rallied in the streets, demanding a deeper investigation into the police department. And then the real bombshell dropped. A former officer came forward. Then another. Then another. One by one, they exposed a web of corruption that stretched far beyond Daniels. Fake evidence, falsified reports, quotas for arrests, a system designed to crush people like her, people who were never meant to have a voice. The mayor held a press conference, his face pale, his words carefully measured. "We are launching an internal investigation into the police department and reviewing all cases connected to Officer Daniels and his colleagues. We will hold those responsible accountable." It was the kind of statement that had been made before, countless times, with no real change. But this time, there was a difference. This time, people weren't letting it go. One evening, Maya sat in her living room, scrolling through the latest updates, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. "Hello." A deep voice on the other end. "Ms. Carter, this is Agent Delgado with the FBI. We need to talk." Maya's stomach tightened. "FBI? Yes, ma'am. We've been watching the case closely, and we believe Daniels was just the tip of the iceberg." Maya's pulse quickened. She had known this was bigger than just one cop, but hearing it confirmed by a federal agent sent a chill down her spine. "What do you need from me?" Delgado hesitated. "Information. Testimony. Your help. This could be a turning point, but we need people like you to step up." Maya leaned back, staring at the ceiling. She had wanted justice, but this was war. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm in." From that moment, everything changed. The case spiraled into a full-scale federal investigation. Names were named. Officers were indicted. Entire precincts were placed under review. And through it all, Maya became the face of the movement. Interviews, rallies, speaking engagements. Her life transformed overnight. But with visibility came danger. The threats started small, anonymous messages, veiled warnings. Then, one night, as she was leaving a meeting with the FBI, she noticed a black SUV trailing her. She didn't panic. She had been trained for this. She took a sharp turn, weaving through the streets, testing them. They followed. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady as she reached under her seat. A Navy SEAL never walked unarmed. She took a deep breath and turned down a dark alley, cutting her headlights. The SUV slowed at the entrance, hesitating. That was their mistake. Maya moved fast. She was out of the car before they saw her coming, her gun raised. "Step out," she commanded. The driver hesitated, but she fired a warning shot into the air. The doors flew open, and two men in suits stumbled out, hands raised. "FBI," one of them shouted. Maya didn't lower her weapon. "Show me your badges." They did. Real badges. Real agents. But something was off. "What do you want?" she demanded. One of the agents, a middle-aged man with graying hair, stepped forward. "You don't understand what you're up against, Miss Carter. This case, it's bigger than just Daniels. It goes all the way up. There are people who don't want this to go any further." Maya's grip tightened. "Are you threatening me?" The man shook his head. "No, we're trying to protect you." She studied them, her instincts sharp. They were telling the truth. But that only made things more dangerous. If even the FBI was struggling to keep control, then she was fighting something much darker than she had imagined. She lowered her gun slightly, but didn't put it away. "I don't need protection. I need justice." The man sighed. "Then you better be ready, because they're coming for you." Maya stared at them, her jaw clenched. She had been fighting battles her whole life. This was just another mission. She nodded. Let them come. Maya didn't sleep that night. The weight of the agent's warning sat heavy on her chest, but fear was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had spent years training for high-risk operations, infiltrating hostile zones, and dismantling threats before they could strike. This wasn't just another mission. This was war, and she was ready for it. She spent hours reviewing the documents she had collected, tracing the tangled web of corruption that stretched far beyond Officer Daniels. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't about one dirty cop, or even a precinct. This was an entire system designed to protect itself at any cost. And now, it saw her as a threat. As dawn broke, Maya made a decision. She wouldn't wait for them to come to her. She would take the fight to them. She made her first call to Marcus. We need to go public. Everything. No more slow leaks, no more caution. Marcus hesitated. Maya, that's dangerous. You're already getting threats. I don't care, she said. If we hold back, they'll pick us apart one by one. But if we flood the world with everything at once, they won't be able to contain it. Marcus exhaled sharply. All right, let's do it. Within hours, every major news outlet had the files. Whistleblower testimonies, internal emails, video footage. Everything was out in the open. Social media exploded. Protests erupted nationwide. The DOJ had no choice but to announce a full-scale investigation. The walls were closing in on the people who had spent decades untouchable. And then, the real retaliation began. That evening, Maya's security system alerted her to movement outside her house. She moved swiftly, checking the cameras. A black SUV idled across the street. Two men in suits stepped out, scanning the area. They weren't FBI. She grabbed her gun. A knock on the door. Firm. Controlled. She didn't answer. Instead, she moved to the side window, keeping out of sight. The men exchanged glances. One of them spoke into his radio. Then, suddenly, bang. The door was forced open. Maya didn't hesitate. She moved like lightning, slipping through the shadows, positioning herself behind them as they swept into her house. A split-second decision. Strike now, or let them get deeper inside. She struck. One blow to the first man's throat sent him reeling, his gun clattering to the floor. The second man spun toward her, but she was faster. A sharp twist of his wrist, and his weapon was hers. Who sent you? She demanded, pressing the barrel to his temple. He smirked, blood trickling from his nose. You think this ends with us? Maya's jaw tightened. No, but you do. She knocked him unconscious with the butt of the gun, then turned to the other man, who was gasping for air. Tell your bosses, she whispered. I'm not afraid of them. And then she disappeared into the night. She knew staying in one place was no longer an option. She went underground, moving from safe house to safe house. But even in hiding, she kept fighting. Every leak, every interview, every rally fueled the fire. More officers came forward. Politicians were exposed. The system was unraveling. Weeks passed. Then months. Daniels was sentenced to life in prison. His testimony brought down entire chains of command. Cities restructured their police departments. Laws were rewritten. Maya became a legend, but she never returned to her old life. Some said she was still out there, fighting from the shadows, ensuring justice never stopped. Others believed she vanished, her mission complete. Only one thing was certain. She had changed the world, and they would never forget her name. End.